to differentiate it from the malignant disease. So that is the most crucial part of the benign liver disease, because many of the benign liver disease, except many, maybe as I think Hari said about infective conditions of liver, I think they are going to cover that separately. You can probably include that as well as the benign liver diseases. But if you are talking about neoplasia for liver, benign neoplasia, the main thing is to identify them and then differentiate them from the malignant conditions. And some of them, if they are symptomatic, need resection. And I think most of them are not pre-malignant conditions. They don't progress to malignancy, except for a few of them. So I think, with that introduction, I'll hand it over to Janani for on benign liver diseases.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
sir. Okay, Janani.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to present about benign liver diseases today. So liver mass is defined as a focal, solid or cystic lesion that can be differentiated from surrounding liver parenchyma by imaging techniques. The differential diagnosis may range from benign asymptomatic lesions to malignant neoplasms. The detection has dramatically increased in recent years due to advancement in imaging techniques. The correct characterization of liver mass is a diagnostic challenge. The diagnosis of focal liver lesion is based on clinical background, imaging findings, and in some cases, pathological analysis also. The imaging techniques show whether the tumor has liquid or solid content. The vascularization profile after contrast administration has also been studied, and contrast enhanced ultrasound, dynamic CT, and dynamic MRI may strongly suggest the diagnosis. So in a relevant number of cases, the final diagnosis will be established solely by pathological analysis obtained by biopsy. But in some cases, biopsy is contraindicated, which we'll be discussing later. So this is a classification of liver mass. It can be cystic or solid lesions. Cystic lesion can be parasitic or non-parasitic. Parasitic includes hydatid cyst, and non-parasitic includes simple cyst, polycystic disease, and biliary cystadenoma. And solid lesion can be inflammatory or tumor or neoplasia or tumors. Inflammatory can be abscess, that is pyogenic or amoebic abscess. Tumors can be benign or malignant. Among benign, hemangioma, hepatic adenoma, and follicular nodular hyperplasia are the three common tumors. And malignancy includes HCC and secondaries. Today, we are going to see about benign solid lesions. So benign liver tumors are heterogeneous group of lesions with different cellular origins. This includes hepatic angioma, which is the most common tumor, benign tumor, and hepatocellular adenoma, which is second most common tumor, and focal nodular hyperplasia. Patient may present with upper abdominal pain or mass in upper abdomen, fever, weight loss, or jaundice. And this fever, it is towards inflammatory mass. Weight loss and jaundice point towards malignancy. So patient may present with any of these findings. And we should elicit certain findings like hepatomegaly, abnormal LFT while investigating the patients. And we should also inquire about altered bowel habits, breast lesions or skin lesions. To rule out primary lesions, as this hepatocellular carcinoma is following secondaries like lesions from colorectal cancers and breast cancers can lead to secondaries in liver. We should also rule out a past history of viral hepatitis, blood transfusion, tattoos, and IV drug abuse. Family history of liver disease and liver tumor is also to be asked for, and medication history like OCP in females has to be ruled out. About hepatic adenoma, liver cell adenoma is the most important benign epithelial tumor of liver. It is less common than FNH. Female preponderance is there. The annual incidence is higher with long-term contraceptive, oral contraceptive use. Regression of tumor may occur after cessation of oral contraceptive usage. Reports of progression to hepatocellular carcinoma many years after stopping oral contraceptive has been seen. It may also be associated with use of clomiphene and anabolic steroids like danazol, and it can be associated with Klinefelter syndrome and metabolic storage diseases like glycogen storage disease and familial adenomatous polyposis. Coming to the pathology, it is composed of cords of benign hepatocytes containing increased glycogen and fat without bile ductules, fibrous septa, and portal tracts. We can see the tumor here. Normal architecture of liver is lost. Large plates of hepatocytes separated by dilated sinusoids, as we could see here. It lacks portal venous supply and because of arterial pressure. Unlike other tumors, hepatic adenomas have potential for hemorrhage and malignant transformation. In nearly all cases, spontaneous rupture or hemorrhage can be seen. Most common if the lesion is more than or equal to 5 centimeters. Even smaller hepatic adenomas are associated with higher risk. Hepatic adenomas in male is high risk for malignancy. Patients will present with upper abdominal pain in 50 to 75% cases. AFP is normal in this case. And the major risk which we should consider includes rupture, hemorrhage, or malignant transformation. In MRA, imaging is the major modality to differentiate the hepatic tumors. So in MRA here, well-demarcated heterogeneous mass containing fat or hemorrhage is typical in this case. In CT, hypervascular and heterogeneous lesion can be seen in arterial phase, and it becomes hypodense in portal phase as a result of arteriovenous shunting. So we could see the MRI findings here. Heterogeneous mass with the fat or hemorrhage. Angiography shows hypervascular well-circumscribed tumor, which is supplied by peripheral arteries. So coming to the treatment, in cases of acute hemorrhage, hepatic artery embolization is the treatment of choice. Resection of symptomatic mass can also be done if the tumor is more than 5 centimeters or if it is rapidly growing tumor, it needs resection. So embolization or ablation can be pursued in poor surgical candidates, but for smaller lesion, we should confirm it with biopsy before doing any ablative procedures. In pregnant women, close follow-up with frequent ultrasound is required to monitor the size. If at all, if the tumor is more than 5 centimeters or if it is more than, if it is rapidly growing, we should consider surgery in the second trimester. Individuals with unilobar disease, hepatic resection can be tried, but in cases with widespread disease with multiple adenomas, or if lesion is more than 10 centimeters, liver transplantation is to be considered. So this is the flow chart showing the management of the lesion. Suspected case of hepatocellular adenoma, we will be going ahead with MRI or CT. If it is male patient, irrespective of the size, resection is required because of a major risk to malignant conversion. If it is a female patient, we can advise lifestyle changes and repeat MRI after 6 months. If it is less than 5 centimeters, we could wait. And if it is more than 5 centimeters, we should repeat the MRI after 1 year. The size is stable or reduced, we can do annual imaging. If the size is increasing progressively, we could consider resection. Sir, any questions?
Okay, stop. Any questions from the students? There's nothing in the chat box, I don't think.
Sir, Hari sir.
Yeah.
Sir, two doubts. Sir, this can be occur in background of cirrhosis, or it is independent of that, only the other reasons mentioned as the reason, sir? Just want to know, sir.
Janani?
Sir, it is independent of cirrhosis, sir.
Yeah. I think, Hari, the answer to your question is, if there is patient who has cirrhosis, either due to hepatitis or alcoholic or whatever, or cryptogenic cirrhosis, if you find a mass lesion, you dare not make a diagnosis of hepatic adenoma. Okay. Unless proven otherwise, it has to be hepatocellular carcinoma, because so that is the most common. And basically one thing is that because of the cirrhosis, what happens in cirrhosis is there is destruction of hepatocytes and regeneration, because liver is an organ known for regeneration. So these nodules represent the areas of regeneration, and then the hard cirrhotic area of the liver represents fibrosis of destroyed hepatocytes. So basically, because there is so much of activity going on over a period of time, there is metaplasia, and then there is anaplasia. So there will be tumor formation, and it's the classical example of the fertile field theory, where the entire liver, because it is cirrhotic, you can develop multiple hepatocellular carcinomas. So you will not find hepatic adenoma in the background of cirrhosis. So if you find a mass lesion in patient with established or presumed liver cirrhosis, it has to be considered to be malignant unless proven otherwise. So that is how you have to look at it. Okay, so does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is the second doubt?
Sir, I forgot about this thing, sir. I just wanted a recollection. So this, for example, in one situation, multiple hepatic adenomas where in men, sir, that can be indication for liver transplantation. Like, for example, if a question asks like indications for liver transplantation, we can add this, sir, or else it is not like that, sir. Because somewhere I read a confused situation.
Yeah, I think Janani has already answered that question very well. Janani, do you want to take that question?
Yes, sir. In male patients, irrespective of the size, hepatic resection is the only option, sir. If if the one side of the lobe is involved, we can consider only hepatectomy of that particular lobe. But if multiple lesions in both lobes, we should consider liver transplantation, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Janani, one more question. Is there a time scale for these adenomas? For example, how long does the adenoma need to be there before it becomes malignant? Are there any signs to suggest that it is becoming malignant?
I'm not sure, sir. I'm not sure about it, sir.
Okay. Anyone else? Do you want to answer that question, Hari?
Sir, it is difficult to distinguish between this hepatocellular adenoma and HCC, sir. But with the history and also the investigations only is possible. So, but it actually difficult is what I have read now, sir. We can't distinguish.
See, I see, just like, for example, with the colorectal adenomas, there is a time scale usually between 10 to 13 years before a colorectal adenoma turns into malignancy. So that adenoma carcinoma sequence that is well established in colorectal carcinomas, I don't think that is been shown in the hepatic adenomas. So the thing is, many times, as Janani has very clearly stated, that if, for example, there is a woman who has been on oral contraceptive pills, I think that is where you may see regression of the tumor. So in that case, you monitor them, and regular screening with either ultrasound scan or MR scan to see whether the tumor size is decreasing, and also what is the vascularity and all those things that can be. If there is any doubt, I think this is a situation where you can do biopsies, but the problem with biopsies is if you don't hit the representative area, you may still get it to be hepatic adenomas where there is probable malignant transformation. So that is a difficulty thing. So basically, I think the rule of the thumb is, if the tumor is in males, you straight away go for resection. If it is females, you may monitor them, and if the lifestyle changes is to stop the oral contraceptive pills and see if the tumor size is shrinking. If the tumor size is static or it is increasing, then you may consider resection because there may be potential malignancy in that. So that is the way you deal with the hepatic adenomas. Shrikant, do you want to come in? Any comments? Naz, any comments?
I have asked 2 questions.
Yeah. Let me go through the question. The first question is, what is the percentage of tumor going for malignant transformation? Is that your question?
Yeah.
And why is it prone to rupture? Do you want to take that question, Janani?
Sir, 20%, sir.
No, why is it prone to rupture? Why?
I'm not very sure, sir.
Hari?
Sir, is it because of non-encapsulated lesions and growing, sir? And soft and dense nature, the degree of hemorrhage is more. So it can increase in size and rupture, sir.
I think 2 reasons. One is the vascularity. It's a very vascular tumor. So because there is a significant amount of neovascularization, the pressure in the tumor increases. And as you said, the liver does not offer so much of resistance to these tumors, and hence there can be rupture. I think other thing is, if the tumor is growing very fast, it outstrips the vascularity, and those areas where the vascularity is less, they become weakened, and then you can have rupture because of that.
Yes, sir.
Shrikant?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Naz, any questions, any comments?
Which of these is the preferred investigation, CT or MRI? Because she was mentioning MRI frequently, whether we would go for a CT or MRI, which is preferred here?
Janani?
Triple phase CT is preferred one modality, ma'am.
Yeah, but your slide was showing MRI all throughout. That's why I asked.
Yes, ma'am. MRI, the image belongs to MRI, but preferred mode is CT.
Oh. Yeah.
Because I think but MR also has good vascular this one outlining, but CT still scores over it because of the it can delineate the blood vessels very well.
Can that CT differentiate between benign and hepatocellular CA?
I think there are features, but if this one borders are blurred, then you may not be able to. I think
that's
is
what,
problem.
based on the CT findings, can we decide the management, whether it is CA or benign?
I think it is very difficult because there are features. Even, for example, this is a very hypervascular tumor, even though it is benign. So if you go by the vascularity alone, I don't think you can, and then you can have areas of necrosis also in this. So it is difficult to say. But the only thing that can be taken this one as a guide is the alpha fetoprotein, because if you hepatocellular adenomas, alpha fetoprotein will be normal, but correspondingly, if you look at the hepatocellular carcinoma, alpha fetoprotein is a very good guide. It is positive in about 90% of cases in this. So you can take that as a guide. But if there is doubt, you can consider doing either ultrasound or a CT guided biopsy. Again, it is flawed because you may not get representative areas.
And also because it is highly vascular.
Vascular, so you may cause bleeding also. So that is another problem.
Very unusual. Benign tumors having
high vascularity.
High vascularity.
So I think it is also advisable, considering that it can cause significant bleeding. You can consider embolization before resection. You can do a lipoidol or any chemoembolization. Now, not necessarily chemo, but embolization of the tumor to reduce the vascularity, and for 24 to 48 hours later, you can operate on them. So
Yeah.
that will reduce the swelling. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Right. Continue.
Yes, sir.
Continue.
Yes, sir. So about focal nodular hyperplasia, it is the second most common benign tumor of liver. Usually a small solitary nodular mass arising in the normal liver. It involves both left and right side equally. It is multiple in 20 to 30% cases. associated with hepatic hemangioma in 20% cases. It represents a proliferative cell response to aberrant dystrophic artery, and it can be maybe associated with conditions characterized with arterial damage like telangiectasia. Pregnancy and OCP is not associated with FNH. So this is a lesion. This is a tumor showing central fibrous scar with radiating septa in the mass. Microscopically, the cords of benign tumor appearing hepatocytes divided by multiple fibrous septae from the central scar. The typical hepatic vascularity is not seen with atypical biliary epithelium. Central scar contains large artery that branches out into multiple small arteries like spoke wheel pattern. So it is this is the typical finding which we could see on angiography. Patients will present with vague abdominal pain and AFP will be normal. In CT or MRI, homogeneous mass with central scar, as we could see here, that rapidly enhances during arterial phase of contrast, and on ultrasound, slightly hypoechoic or isoechoic lesion can be seen. On color Doppler, these central arteries which have spoke wheel pattern can be seen. No treatment is recommended in asymptomatic cases. The rarity of complications and absence of symptoms usually points towards conservative management. Treatment is only pursued in exceptional cases. Example, pedunculated, expanding or exophytic lesion because of suspicion with carcinoma. Resection is the treatment of choice in such cases. Resection in cases of diagnostic uncertainty. So this resection is usually done for histologic confirmation, not for recommended treatment. So this is the management protocol. So in cases of suspected FNH, contrast enhanced imaging, preferably MRI is done here. The diagnosis, if it is FNH, we should go ahead with contrast enhanced ultrasound. And if the diagnosis is still uncertain, biopsy can be done. If the diagnosis of FNH is itself doubtful, if it is more than 3 centimeter, biopsy can be done.
What biopsy you are doing?
Sir?
What biopsy?
Sir, image guided biopsy is usually recommended, sir.
FNAC or TrueCut?
In this FNAC, sir.
I'm not sure, that's why.
FNAC, sir. FNA biopsy only.
Are you sure, Ma? Because you may not be able to get
Yeah.
because the cord fibrous structures are there. There will be hard fibrotic bands in between the sheets of hepatocytes and vascularity. So basically, I think you may still need to do a TrueCut biopsy, ultrasound guided or CT guided biopsy.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
FNAC is not going to be useful.
Okay, sir. Okay. Yes, sir. Sir, any other questions, sir, regarding this management?
No, Dr. Ramakrishna has asked a question. See.
Let me see what it is.
Sir, contrast enhanced ultrasound. Yes, sir.
Ah.
Sir, that was even new to me. It was given like they'll give contrast before doing ultrasound so that in ultrasound the enhanced lesions can be seen. It seems, sir.
No, but what contrast is used?
Sir, I'm not sure about
Because
it. Sir.
I think even in the for example, in fistula management, I think he was talking about contrast enhanced ultrasound scan, 3D ultrasound, all these things. So I am not sure what contrast do they use. Anybody has an idea? Nas, do you have any idea what contrast do they use for ultrasound guided contrast enhanced ultrasound?
Sir, in some study, like what papers I have reviewed, they were using gas, sir. Gas as contrast this thing, but I don't know how it is going to helpful here.
No, it will help, but how do they inject it? How do they give the contrast? That's the thing.
micro bubbles or nano bubbles of gas, they inject intravenously, it seems, sir. Yeah, so they
So I
make
think-
it as micro bubbles.
Yeah, I think, that is probably what I understood, but I was not sure. Anybody else has any idea? Ramakrishna, do you have any idea, sir? Good evening.
Hello, good evening, sir. No, for me also it is a new term. That's why I asked, sir.
Yeah. Srikanth. Srikanth is a fount of knowledge, so Srikanth will know.
First time I'm hearing contrast enhanced ultrasound.
See, the thing is, I think for your knowledge, all of you,
Read about it.
contrast enhanced.
You have
ultrasound
seen that, you should go through that, Alva.
Yes, sir,
Okay.
sir. That's what, sir. But the bubbles, the gas bubbles, how it is, I'm not sure about it.
No,
They have
what?
given micro bubbles or nano bubbles. They'll be injecting in the blood. So they are using two other particles, sir, nitrogen gas and also sulfur hexafluoride. They're mixing it with some phospholipid content and they're injecting through IV, it seems. So these are the two modalities, like first generation and second generation they have given. Yes,
I
sir.
think we should read up about it. I think one thing is for sure, ultrasound is coming, becoming very big because of the contrast enhancement and 3D. So the 3D reconstruction on ultrasound, now it is actually when I listen to the talk for fistulas and perianal sepsis, they are saying that if the images are so good that you don't need to use MRI anymore. They will be able to give you all the information that is required in terms of all the perianal sepsis, the fistula, the multiple tracts and everything. So I think the same thing may be applicable here also.
Sir.
Okay, continue.
Yes, sir. So liver hemangioma, it is the most common benign tumor of liver. It is mainly seen in women aged 30 to 50 years. It is usually single, less than 5 centimeter in diameter. It is also equally seen in both right and left liver. Giant hemangiomas, it includes lesions more than 5 centimeter. It can reach up to 20 centimeters. It belongs to non-epithelial lesion, microscopically endothelium lined blood-filled spaces that are separated by thin fibrous septa. The enlargement or by ectasia rather than neoplasia. And hemangiomas more than 10 centimeters are called giant hemangiomas. The features of fibrosis, calcification, and thrombosis can be seen most commonly in larger lesions. Patients, they don't have any symptoms mostly. Symptomatic if the tumor is more than 5 centimeter. Tumors above 10 centimeter present with abdominal distension. It is large compressive mass. It may cause vague abdominal symptoms in cases of giant hemangiomas. This is a syndrome with Kasabach-Merritt syndrome. The syndrome of thrombocytopenia, consumptive coagulopathy, and purpura. It is rarely seen, and the presence of this syndrome complex indicates severity of the disease. LFT and tumor markers are normal here.
Why they should present as abdominal distension, any tumor more than 10 centimeter?
Sir, usually these benign liver tumors, they won't be this much big, sir. It will be less than 5 centimeter.
No, why should it present as abdominal distension? Abdominal distension means intestinal
Abdominal
dilatation.
mass. Sorry, yes, sir. They'll present with abdominal mass. My mistake, sir. These benign tumors, they usually don't have any mass in the upper abdomen. But in this hemangiomas, if the tumor is about 10 centimeter, they can present with abdominal mass, upper abdominal mass. That is what I meant, sir. So can I go ahead, sir?
Why do they get pain in these situations?
Sir, they can compress the surrounding structures, causing pain, sir.
No, not compressing.
Surrounding structure ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಡಮ್ಮ. What surrounding structure? Compression will cause pain. You will ನೀವೇ ಸಿಗಾಕೊಂತೀರಾ ಇವಾಗ.
See, why will it? See, these are
Ah.
soft structures, no?
Yeah.
While it compresses.
Which surrounding structures it will compress? How does it cause pain?
Hari?
Sir, the large if it is more than 10 centimeter, there will be the vascularity, the vascularity pattern will be changed, sir. So
No,
they
no.
can.
Vascular pattern will not change. Hari, can you answer that question? Why will they get pain?
Sir, stretching of caps. I'm not sure.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stretching of liver capsule.
Yes.
Stretching of liver capsule will cause the pain. Indraja or Pawan, what kind of tumor is a hemangioma? What is it embryonically called? Embryologically.
Sir, I'm not sure, sir.
Pawan?
Sir, cavernous, sir, blood vessels, sir.
No,
Mesoderm.
Yeah. It's a cavernous hemangioma only. But what is it called? Naz has answered that question, but Naz is too intelligent to answer that question. I think it was meant for postgraduates. It's a hamartoma. Okay,
Yes,
it's called it's a type of hamartoma. What is an hamartoma? So is lipoma a hamartoma?
Abnormal mixture of
Abnormal
normal
tissue
cells.
in
No. It is proliferation of normal tissue or congregation of normal tissue more than what is expected. That is hamartoma. So there will be no abnormal tissue here. It's all normal tissue only, but proliferation of normal tissue in either in its not natural inhabitant place or outside its natural place. So that is hamartoma. So basically, either lipoma is also a hamartoma unless it becomes liposarcoma. Okay, right. Continue, ma.
So in ultrasound, the lesion can be seen as homogeneous hyperechoic mass, and CT and MRI or diagnostic if typical peripheral nodular enhancement pattern followed by central enhancement on delayed phases is seen. MRI is the key imaging modality in hemangiomas. Percutaneous biopsy is dangerous and is not recommended in these cases. So for asymptomatic cases, observation is recommended. Treatment will be restricted for symptomatic cases with continuous mass growth, compression of adjacent organs, or complications like rupture with intraperitoneal bleeding. And if it is associated with this syndrome, it is considered as the choice for resection. Enucleation is the treatment of choice for symptomatic cases. Other modalities like liver resection and hepatic artery ligation in cases of major bleeding can be considered. So several studies evaluated enucleation and hepatectomy. Enucleation is associated with lower morbidity, shorter operation time, lesser blood loss, and few complications. When lesion is more than 10 centimeter, there is no difference between enucleation and resection. When lesion is located peripherally, enucleation is easier. For centrally located lesions, it needs hepatectomy because with enucleation, the longer vascular inflow control is required and longer operating time, and there are more chances of blood loss. So hepatectomy will be ideal for centrally located lesions. For unresectable giant hemangiomas, liver transplantation is reserved. If severe symptoms like respiratory distress, abdominal pain, failure of previous interventions, or life-threatening complications like the association of this syndrome, where the consumptive coagulopathy, everything is there, we could consider liver transplantation. So the non-surgical options like transcatheter arterial embolization and radiofrequency ablation can be tried. This transcatheter arterial embolization is used to control acute bleeding and shrink hemangiomas prior to surgery. And RFA for the lesions more than 5 centimeter or rapidly growing tumor. The thermal damage to endothelial vascular structures promote thrombosis prior to surgery. So RFA can be performed under ultrasound or CT guidance. Sir, this is sir. Thank you.
You finished early.
Yes, sir.
You had shown me the slides about the the tumor, the malignancy.
Hepatocellular carcinoma, sir.
Yeah.
So, but it was covered completely by Hari, sir.
Hari,
I compared
okay.
the
Okay.
last class only he had talked about it.
Now, Pawan, have you got your slides ready for the thing, or do you want to do it some other time? The liver function test, physiology, liver function test. You're not ready with your slides?
Sir, on 16th, sir, when cirrhosis of liver is there, sir, on that day. I present.
Okay, right. If there are there any questions on benign liver disease? We've covered the hydatid cyst in detail last time.
Yes,
We've
sir.
covered all the benign tumors now. So any combined questions, Srikanth?
Nothing, liver abscess you didn't cover, is it?
Liver
Next,
abscess, next
Separate class.
separate class, liver abscess. See, because if you combine two of them, it will go on to 1.5 hours. That is why I think he's put it as separately.
45 minutes, Akapa.
45 minutes is enough, I think. Naz, any comments on the benign tumors? Any additions?
Oh, no, nothing.
Ramakrishna sir?
I think, sir, is there any role for steroids in this hemangioma?
Janani, you want to take that question? Is there any role for steroids?
So no, sir. I didn't come across that, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. I'm not sure, sir.
I think the hemangiomas, the treatment is either you watch and observe and see if there is any increase in size. And once it gets to big sizes between 5 and 10 centimeters, then you start thinking about resection and things like that. Otherwise, I don't think any other treatment is warranted. Radio frequency ablation in patients who are unfit for surgery as a standalone procedure can be done. Combined with, if you want, you can combine that with the arterial embolization. And if in patients are fit, you can consider resection or either enucleation or resection depending on the size and location of the tumor.
Radio frequency ablation and embolization, are there curative?
No, they may
No.
not be curative, but
That's
the thing is, if patients are not fit for surgery,
only for those people.
so in such people, you can use it as standalone procedure.
Okay.
Otherwise, you can use it as a preparatory procedure.
Preparatory procedure.
You can use it to shrink the vascularity and shrink the tumor size and then do the surgery. But if, for example, patients are unfit, then you can just use it. And if at all it shows signs of increasing in size, you can use it again. I don't think there is any contraindication of using RFA on separate occasions. I think Rajiv Lochan, if he was there, he would have thrown a bit more light on these things, but he is not in station. So we couldn't get him today.
Sir, if you find some liver lesion during lap cholecystectomy, then whether it is prudent to touch it, take biopsy, something like that, or just leave it and proceed with the cholecystectomy only?
See, I think the problem is, if at all, if you don't know the vascularity status of the particular, lesion, then if you take biopsy it and it starts bleeding, then it becomes a major problem. So I think the thing to do would be, most of the time when we do an ultrasound, they would have probably mentioned any lesion, and if they have mentioned anything unusual about this particular lesion, then it may be prudent to investigate these people pre-operatively, get a CT scan or an MR scan to characterize the lesion. Then you will be more confident. If for example, if patient has been admitted as an emergency and the patient warrants acute cholecystitis and an emergency cholecystectomy, I think the safest thing to do, in my opinion, would be to just do a cholecystectomy and note that this particular lesion is there, then investigate it further and deal with it at a later date. Because when the patient is ill, it may not be prudent to subject them to another procedure at the same time. Shrikant, what do you think?
No, don't do anything.
Naz, what would you do?
No, I wouldn't do anything, wouldn't touch it at that time, but later on we can investigate and find out afterwards.
Sir
What the
Ramakrishna,
nature is.
sir Ramakrishna, sir, ನಿಮ್ಮ opinion ಏನು sir? What is your opinion?
Same thing, sir, just for the
Okay.
benefit of postgraduate
think-
students.
So for postgraduates, so basically you have to divide this situation into two. If it is an emergency cholecystectomy for acute cholecystitis or a perforated gallbladder, empyema gallbladder, if you see
No,
any-
even straightforward gallbladder, if you find anything, in the liver, don't touch.
I know, I'm just
Because the
classic-
commonest lesion you find is hemangioma, you will land in a soup.
I just listen to me. Basically, in an emergency situation, you would not have any other investigation apart from an ultrasound. So that is what I was coming to, because most of the time you will have an ultrasound scan and it shows acute cholecystitis, and then you decide to operate. In that, they may have mentioned this lesion if it is there in the liver, but they may not have mentioned it. In patients who have symptomatic gallstones where you are investigating, and if they show that there is a lesion, you have time to investigate the matter. You can go ahead and get a CT or an MR and characterize the lesion a bit better. So when you go in for a laparoscopic cholecystectomy, you are armed with more information whether you should do anything about it or not. You may do an alpha fetoprotein and everything, and then decide what you should do. So that way, you have better information about this particular lesion when you go in. But when you are operating and you see an incidental lesion, safest thing to do is to not do anything, just do the cholecystectomy, come out, and later, after the patient has recovered, you investigate the matter, and you can mention this to the patient and say, we are going to investigate it later and deal with it accordingly. I think that maybe Shrikant agreed or not agreed?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Because commonest is hemangioma, you will land in
Correct.
soup.
Yeah. So common hemangioma, you should not do anything at that time.
Yes,
See
sir. Agree.
So only situation would be if there is any lesion next to the gallbladder bed and things, then it becomes a bit slightly difficult. Then you will have to weigh the possibility whether this is gallbladder cancer. So that is another thing that you have to be watchful about. Okay, I think if there are no further questions, we will close this class. And I think Pawan will talk about the liver physiology and liver function tests and interpretation and all those things in the next class. Okay.
Yeah.
So good night to everybody. Thank you very much for all your
Well-
contributions.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good
sir.
night.
Thank you.